Hey everybody, Hunter back again from Showtime Studios. As you can see, we have the trike sitting over to the side now, and we're back on the F100 build, the buddy build with Steve Courtney. And we're going to try to wrap that up this week so we can get it ready for PinCon. So I'm going to do another tutorial here, and actually this time we're going to do this fender on the passenger side of the truck, and we're going to do it in a different color, sort of like it's been replaced, kind of like we did on the door and the hood. We did the blue door and we did the green hood. So we're going to do a red fender on this. And what I want to try to replicate on this one is that fender has actually been painted at some point in time. So we're going to use the silver grayish color that we have down underneath of it. We're going to leave some of that on there. And then we're going to go back in and do a little bit more rusting work on it. And we're going to do it all here on video, all the way from start to finish, and show you how to take this panel here and turn it into a weathered look panel. So we'll get the camera down here, we'll zoom in on it, and we'll go from there. Okay, and see if I can draw it in a little bit closer here so you can see what's going on. Alright, so what we're going to be doing is the right side fender on this. We're actually going to be taping that off, and you can see it's the base color right now. And we want it to come out something more like the hood or like this door over here. So the first step that we're going to do is get this thing taped off. And we're just going to use some 10mm Tamiya masking tape. And I'm going to try to keep this on the video as much as I can. And still be able to see what I'm doing here. But we're going to go in and take this off. And since I'm using an airbrush, I don't have to get this, down extremely well. This is a very thin coat of paint that I'm actually putting down on the surface. So we'll tuck everything in here, and I'll show you the steps that I go through to do this type of work. Masking is, one of the critical things sometimes on making a project come out good, or a two-tone paint job or something like that. So the good thing about the Tamiya masking tape is once you put it down on a surface like this, if you look there, you can see a straight line down through that where the panel line is, and all we need to do is go in there with the hobby knife and we'll trim that off. So we're just going to drop in on that line, that panel line, with the hobby knife, and we're going to follow that all the way down the panel. And when you're trying to replicate this effect, you want to make sure that you keep the knife directly in that line, because you don't want anything else over onto like the door, because then it ruins the effect. So take your time and make sure you get that right. And when you're done, that's the actually the back of the fender panel line there. You can see it taped off. So next we're going to move up to the top of the fender. And we're going to do the same technique. We're just going to lay the tape down. We're going to overlap it onto the panel that we're painting. And then we're just going to smooth that down. And the panel line shows up. So you just want to drop the knife in that panel line. And just follow that straight back. And we'll get this little corner cut out of here. all of that straight off the front of the hood here. Just like that. And we're just going to come in and remove the piece that's overlapped onto our fender that we're going to be painting. And we'll take that piece out. And we'll smooth it down again. We'll wrap the excess around the front of the hood here. Keep any overspray off of that. And I'm not real happy with this one line back here in the back, so I'm going to put another small piece of tape on this just to clean that line up a little bit. I'm just going to line that up with the edge of our panel line. Like I say, this is the finished. When I'm doing this tutorial, this will be on a finished model that's going on the show table, so I've got to get this as good as I can. Okay, so there we have the fender taped off all the way across, and we've got it taped right to the panel lines, and you can see the color there. Now the next thing I'm going to tape off is this little piece right here, which is the front valance piece that's behind the bumper. To keep the effect going, you wouldn't want that red because, or whatever color you're going to paint it, because that is a separate panel. So we're just going to tape that off, and I'm actually not going to cut that one since it's a small area. I'm just going to tape right to the edge of it. So there we have that panel taped off, and now we have the fender ready to be sprayed. So what I've got is some of the Tamiya red brown, which is a Hull red, is actually the true color of it. We've got that in the airbrush, and we're just going to go in, and we're not going to cover the whole surface down with this red brown. We're just going to kind of do spots of it, and we're going to let some of the base color show through. And I'll try to get it over here in the view of the camera so you can see what we're doing. But we're just going to go in and kind of spot this around. I'm not trying to cover the whole panel up. Some areas will be brighter than others. And this will all come in when we do the salt technique. So that's kind of what we've done to the panel. We just kind of spotted it there. You can see the little rough spots and stuff like that in it. And then the other color will be underneath of that, the base color. So that's pretty much all there is to doing that part. Now the next step that we're going to do is go ahead and turn on the hair dryer and heat this up and get this Tamiya paint to dry out here real quick so we can start the salting technique on it. So I'm just going to put it underneath the table so it's not real noisy, and we're going to dry out this acrylic paint. And just like I said before, it's not doing anything you know, special or anything like that. All we're doing is just waving the hair dryer back and forth just to dry up this acrylic, and this will also give you an idea of you know, how quick and simple this technique can be. You don't need to drag it out overnight and do, you know, make multiple steps out of it. It's actually a pretty simple technique. Alright, so we have that dried out, so that's what we have now. And get the camera to focus in here. There we go. And that's what it looks like with the Hull red sprayed on. Now the next step we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get our water and our brush, and we're going to start working on salting the panel down. And I'm not going to put any salt on this raised piece of trim here at the bottom of the truck, so I'm not going to cover that with any water. I'm just going to do the rest of the panel. because when I do my finish work on that, I'll actually go back in and do some dry brushing on that panel, on that raised trim at the bottom. So we just want to cover everything else but that piece. And then also there's a little bit of a section underneath of that chrome, or that raised detail that's on here. So we're going to put a little bit of water down there. So we have our water on. Now next we're going to move on to putting a little bit of salt down. And like I say, it's the same technique as we used before. It's just random. The more you put on, the more the base color is going to show through. So we have the salt down on the fender. Next we're going to go ahead and use the hair dryer, and we're going to dry out that water. And we're doing the same technique we did when we dried out the acrylic paint. We're just waving the hair dryer back and forth over the salt to get the moisture from the water that we put down on the surface. We're trying to get rid of all that and get the salt to turn a bright white, and then it's ready to be airbrushed. And I had a couple comments come up on the last video on the salting that that you couldn't. Some people didn't feel that you could do it that quickly, and that's why I'm doing kind of this video, to show you that you can do it right here all at one time if you use the right steps and the right materials. Alright, so we have the salt dried out now, so this is what it looks like, and that's with the salt on the fender. Now I have some Tamiya X7 red that we're going to be using for the next color. Alright, we've got that in the airbrush, so now we're going to spray that color over top of the entire fender. And we're not putting down a heavy coat. We just want enough down on the fender to just get it all colored in. And you can actually vary, how much you put down in certain areas compared to another. That kind of gives it a little bit of tone definition and makes it come out a little bit more realistic than having it all a consistent, even color. Because when things start to weather, a lot of times they're not consistent. And we're going to spray up underneath of the fender here a little bit with the red. Okay. And that's all it takes for that. And here it is with the red sprayed on the fender. And there we go. That's a good shot of it. And you can see the salt and how much texture is on that. So next we're going to go back to the hair dryer and we're going to dry up that acrylic that we just sprayed down. And hopefully everybody can see how much of an easy technique this is and how quick you can do it. And if you go back to the salt technique that I did, the tutorial, the first one, you'll see all the tools and stuff that we use to do it. I'm actually using the same thing in this video, so if you want a whole list of the materials and stuff, just refer back to that video, and I'll tell you everything we're going to be working with. So we're just drying up this X7 red Tamiya acrylic. Okay, so there we have it all dried up, and the next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and pull the masking tape off and get that out of the way before we start knocking off the salt. So we'll just go ahead and unmask everything here. And I'll hold it back up here and show you what it looks like as soon as we get it all unmasked and before we go on to the next step. Okay, and there you can see that we have it all unmasked, and just that fender is red. I'm trying to get the camera to zoom in here. There we go. That's looking pretty decent there. Hopefully that'll give you a good idea what it looks like right now. But you can see how clean the lines are on it. So that looks like a fender that's been bolted on here at some point in time, and it's a different color. So next we're going to move on to knocking off the salt that we put down on the surface. And like I say, you can do this with a brush, you can do it with a toothbrush. But in the last video, I showed you how I just used my finger to kind of knock this salt off of here. It works real well. And it actually, the salt residue will kind of sand the surface a little bit also. And we've almost got it here. And then next we'll move on to the you remember in the first video we done on this, I said, get a brush and make sure that you get around all the, crevices and up against the raised detail and all that stuff, and make sure you've got all the salt off the surface. Okay, and there we go. And when it's all said and done, that's what the whole panel looks like. It actually looks like a red fender. It has some peeling paint on it, and came out pretty good. Now just go in and clean all the panel lines out, make sure they're good to go. And we'll do some dry brushing on this. We'll also be doing some powder work with the Tamiya weathering system. Once all the colors and stuff are down, and we'll do a final weathering over it. To actually give it a little bit of a dusty appearance as far as the rust. So, but that shows you how quick you can do that. It's a pretty easy process. This video, I'm at about 17 minutes now, and I went from the base color to pretty much a finished product on that fender in that amount of time. So it's a pretty quick technique to do. It's easy. And if you have any questions or concerns, just leave me a comment on the video, and I'll be more than glad to get back to you. And like always, I thank you for watching and supporting Showtime Studios, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.